Om Magana Timaranda Sangana Gana Salakaya Chaksurun Miritam Yana Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Vistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupakadamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Siguru Siyata Parakamaram Sigurun Vaishnavam Sa Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Samsadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Larita Shiveshikan Vitam Jam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Padanta Shami Tinam Namaste Sarasati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Praskata Desana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatam Vyasam Tato Jayo Dhirayat Nashta Prayasho Bhadresu Nityam Bhagata Seva Bhagatiyatam Bhakti or Bhavati Naistiki Nigama Kapatura Garitam Palam Shukam Rita Shavi Samitam Pibata Bhagatam Rashamarayam Mahora Horisiko Vivakam. Good morning, welcome to Transcendental Tuesday. Madhava, Anjali, Sundari Priya, Joe, I don't know who else I might have missed here. Jimmy, good morning. Thomas, listening in from Idaho. Anthony, I think possibly from Ogden. I'm not sure. There's all kinds of things flying back and forth on the WhatsApp group here. They're drop-down menus. Thanks very much for joining us. We've got some, if you're not from Utah, we have our first inclement weather rolling in. Temperatures dropped 20 degrees. Some good, much needed rain. The parrots no longer get to spend the evenings out in their aviary. Once the temperatures drop below 55 degrees, we don't want to risk having them out there. So they're out still during the day. The day have been nice up to this date. I'm not sure about today. It's quite overcast and a little chilly. But anyway, the parrots have been out during the days and during the nights, but at least during the nights they'll be back inside. Lots of visitors, lots of tourism. Even though the pandemic's going on and people are less mobile than they used to, still the temple is a favorite spot to visit, and especially local people. Whenever they have relatives in from out of state, they always like to bring them to the temple and show off. And many people have come so many times now, they're starting to bring their own little carrots and apple pieces to feed the lamas. And so we don't hardly even have to pay to feed them. The visitors do that. Our verse today is the 4th verse in the 3rd chapter, 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you've got it before you, welcome to read it with me. Pasyanti ado rupam abhadra chakshusha sahasra padaru bhujananad bhutam sahasra morda shravanaksi nasikam sahasra mola dalala shat. The devotees with their perfect eyes. When the devotees see Krishna, they're not exactly seeing him with these material eyes, these retinas, these corneas. But the soul itself has senses. We're sentient beings. This body would not have a head, would not have a neck, torso, and arms, were it not a covering for the soul. Just like my shirt has a neck, it has a chest area, it has sleeves because it's tailored for my body. So similarly, the body is tailored for the soul. Therefore, the soul has a head, the soul has neck, arms, legs, and the soul has eyes. But one must learn to see with spiritual eyes. As long as your eyes are enamored with matter, it is said, Naham prakasha sarvasha yoga maya samanvidaham. You're just seeing what Maya wants you to see. You're just seeing just like there's a screen behind me, you're just seeing the screen of Yoga Maya, the illusory energy of this material world. Behind the screen is the full treasure house of the spiritual world, full of variegatedness, permeated and saturated with intimate love, the nature of which we could hardly even begin to understand in our materially contaminated state. The real world lies just beyond this screen, and what we're seeing is a veneer, a facade only of matter. When you're eyes of your soul, your spiritual self, are awakened. And they're not awakened through the physical aspects of yoga. They're not awakened by mental speculation. They're not awakened by having an impersonal conception of the absolute truth. It says, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Valochanena. The eyes of the soul are awakened only by the practice of bhakti, devotion. It is only through devotion to the Lord that one gets eyes tinged with the salve of love, that one can penetrate the veil of illusion in this material world and see the expanse of the spiritual world behind the veil of this material world. Naham prakasha sarvasha yogama mudoyam. Those who are less intelligent, those who try to understand things as they are using their feeble mind and their imperfect senses, they cannot penetrate the veil of mudho yam. Naham tebyo managari. Krishna says there are certain classes of men who, by following their preferred procedures, are never going to plumb the depths of reality. But through devotion, and it's not your effort, rather it is your service which prompts Krishna then to open the curtain. Sitting out in the audience, there's really nothing you can do to cause the curtain to be open. It's going to be the stage manager when he decides to open the curtain. So it doesn't get opened through our mental agility or our mental gymnastics or our austerities or even our going to the yoga studio. The curtain gets opened when the stage manager wants to open it. So we see God decides to reveal himself to us. There's nothing we can do per se to force God to come front and center, but we can serve God in such a nice way that God himself becomes attracted by our service. So it says here, the devotees with their perfect eyes, and those are the eyes of the spiritually liberated, purified self, see the transcendental form of the Lord. And this is one way of seeing him also. Just like Arjuna saw the universal form on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. That wasn't his preferred vision of the Lord, but the Lord shared it with Arjuna so that common men could understand something about the greatness of God. However, Arjuna quickly, as soon as he got the chance, he said, let this vision be finished. Then Krishna wound up that big universal form with thousands of legs, thighs, arms, and faces, and then showed Krishna, reverted back to his two-armed form, which is the form that Arjuna loved and related to. Sudirdam idam rupam dristavam asam. Let this horrible, expansive, universal form be finished, and I'll again return to my two-armed manifestation before you. So in that body, it is said in this verse, there are thousands of heads, ears, eyes, and noses, decorated with thousands of helmets and glowing earrings and adorned with gardens. For many years, I think it was about 24 years, we did bake sales to raise money for the construction of the Spanish Fork Temple. That temple opened in 2001, and then I wanted to stay home and cultivate the membership. And so, because the bake sales and all involved a lot of traveling, a lot of absenteeism, and I started to offer my services to do pujas for the local Utah Indian community. I did a number of weddings, housewarmings, hair cuttings, Vastu pujas, and that went on for a few years until the Indian community actually got a Sanskrit scholar, someone who'd been raised in a gurukul and had been doing pujas since he was knee-high to a grasshopper and spoke Sanskrit. And then it was time for me to step aside, and that's when the color festivals got busy, so everything worked out really well. But one of the key verses, or one of the key compositions, which is integral to every puja in the temple, in people's homes, is a very ancient song, which is called the Purusha Shukta. Nobody knows when this began. As long as there's been memory, the Purusha Shukta has been chanted at all auspicious occasions. And when you do a puja, when you do a worship ceremony, and you do a fire sacrifice, Om Sahasrasir Shah Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapade Sabhamam Vishnu Shaha. You offer the samagri, the auspicious healing herbs, into the fire, and you pour ghee on the fire, and then you say Shaha, let it be consumed. You're taking the gross elements and through the fire and the ghee you're converting into something subtle, and as they rise you ask the demigods and all those higher beings on whom we depend for our sustenance to enjoy those. So you do the Purusha Shukta, which is 17 verses, during the offerings on the fire. Then you do Sadupachar, whereby you offer 16 items of worship to the Lord Krishna, deity, beginning with a place to sit, a welcome, some water for washing the foot, some water for washing the hands, a little yogurt and honey for eating. Then you do some bathing with butter, yogurt, milk, honey, ghee, and some auspicious substances. And then you dry the Lord, you offer him perfumes, you offer him flour, you offer him some clothes, lower garment, upper garment, a byankara, you offer him crown and jewels. Then you offer him something to eat, incense, a lamp, you offer him something for digestive age called tambala. You offer him a donation, and in this way you offer 16 items of worship to the Lord, which are again accompanied by the 17 prayers of the Purusha Shukta. So I'm just going to see if I can remember those. It's been a long time since I've done pujas, but I did the Sputam Yakshabhavyam Utamrita Risheshana Yana Tarotihi Edavanasya Mahimato Jigamsya Purusha Parasha Vishwabhutani Triparasham Vitam Divi Tripadavadai Purusha Parasha Vavatparam Tato Visham Vikramate Sasanasane Avi. And so it goes. And the translation of this most ancient of all hymns includes these verses. The Purusha has thousands of heads, thousands of eyes, thousands of feet, spread all over the universe. He is beyond our ability to count. He is all the past. He is the future. He is the present. He is the Lord of deathlessness. And he arises within our vision for those who have eyes of devotion. He's much greater than anything that we could see or anything we can imagine. Everything in this material universe is but a small proportion of his creative energies. The vast majority of the creative energies compose the spiritual world, which is eternal and imperishable, and which is beyond the pale of this material world. In those 3/4 of the spiritual world live the infallible living beings, the Nityasiddha. Literally, fallible comes from fall. So infallible are those who never fell, and fallible are those who fell. So about 1/4 of the created living beings fell into this material world, which also represents a small portion, less than 1/4 of the Lord's creative energies. But that we fell doesn't mean that every manifested soul fell. Most souls, when they appeared from their sleeping state, and they had a choice to depart from the Lord or stay with the Lord in the spiritual world. And of course, departing, you develop your material body, your material senses, which cover your spiritual vision. But remaining faithful and never leaving the spiritual world, the 3/4 living beings, instead of doing what we did, which is to be covered with matter, they some sort of serve the Lord with their hands, with their arms, with their eyes, with their nose, with their sense of touch, and they blossomed and bloomed in their original spiritual bodies. They are referred to as infallible, which means they never, ever fell. And you and I, in this material world, covered with material bodies, with imperfect senses, unable to see the real world, enamored only with this veneer, this facade of matter, we are called fallible living beings. I hope I didn't spoil your day with that revelation, but the good news is we can turn it around. In the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, 16th and 17th verse, Krishna describes these two types of living beings. Do imo purusho loke sara chaksara evacha sara savani bhutane kutashto sara uchate. Krishna is saying there are two types of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the relatively small portion of the material world, every living being is fallible. And in the greater spiritual world, every living being is infallible. Now, besides the fallible and infallible, and when you say fallible and infallible, even for the infallible, when you describe living beings as infallible, what you're saying is there was a possibility that they could fall. And for the fallible, you're saying not only was there a possibility, but they did it. So contained within that reference and that definition is the understanding that because we have the potential to fall, we are not supreme. Sure, it's true to say God is spirit and I'm spirit. God has the qualities of eternality, bliss, and knowledge. And being qualitatively one, I also have Satchidananda, the qualities of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. But I am fallible. I may have fallen or I may not have fallen, but even the ones that didn't fall, because they were capable of falling, the conclusion is that there are categories of spirit, that the fallible and the infallible are not the last word in spirit. They're not the be-all and end-all. And that's described here by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Uttama purushas tu anya paramatma udarita yo lokam trayam avisha bibarteya avyayeshwara. Besides these two, who are infinitesimal. In other words, we're not the potent, we're not the energetic source, but we are energy. We are emanations from the Lord. There are the living beings who are emanations from the internal potency, the spiritual potency of the Lord, and then there, which is an emanation of the inferior potency of the Lord. Now, it is a fact that one potency can become overwhelmed by another potency. Because although we're spirits and we're eternal, nevertheless, because we're tiny, we as living beings can be overwhelmed by the one potency, can be overwhelmed by another potency. But the potent source can never be overwhelmed. He's the puppet master. He's the sun, which can never be covered by a cloud. And therefore, this verse says, besides the fallible and besides the infallible, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the three worlds and maintaining them. Now, the infallible get to stay and live with the Lord. They get to shelter his lotus feet. They get to see him every day in the way they most prefer to see him, either as a friend, as a parent, as a lover, as a senior, or they serve him in some past, like the grass, the water, the clouds in the spiritual world. The infallible living beings are always connected. They never disconnected with the Lord. They never fell. They never experienced birth, death, disease, and old age. They retained their original blissful spiritual nature because they clung fast to the lotus feet of the Lord. They were never unfaithful. And we were. But if we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, then we can rehabilitate ourselves and revive our spiritual consciousness and go back home, back to Godhead. And once we've returned back to home, back to Godhead, we will not for a second time fall into this world. And once we return back to home, back to Godhead, we will have learned the same lesson that the infallible living beings learned, only we just learned it in a harder way. But it doesn't matter, because we'll have achieved the same status as the living beings who never left. Prabhupada gives the example, just like now it's overcast here in Utah. It's morning, 7:30, 8 o'clock, Mountain Daylight Time, and there are clouds. But the clouds may clear out, the sun cause them to depart, and we may have a crystal clear, cloudless afternoon. That's not what the weather forecast says, but anything's possible in God's creation. Now, if this afternoon is a cloudless day, it doesn't matter that it had been cloudy in the morning. It's still cloudless in the afternoon. Now, compare that cloudless afternoon to another day where it was cloudless in the morning and it would continue to be cloudless in the afternoon. But there's no difference between that afternoon cloudlessness and this afternoon cloudlessness. The fact that in the morning there was or there was not makes no difference. The afternoon cloudlessness is the same. So in the same way, those who go back to home, back to Godhead, they're accepted as completely full with transcendental knowledge. Krishna doesn't hold it against them that they turned away from him. He's much more high-minded than that. In fact, when you go back to the spiritual world, Krishna's going to have a huge party. Krishna's missed you every single moment, hour, day, week, month, after year, lifetime after lifetime, perhaps eon after eon, that you were separated from Krishna. Krishna felt himself, even though he's completely self-sufficient and full, he doesn't require anything external for his pleasure, still on one level, you. He missed the uniqueness of you. He missed what it is that you and you only can bring to the table of reciprocal loving relationships. And so that longing on the part of the Lord to be reunited with you has been constant and ongoing for the whole time that you were in this material world. You weren't aware of it. You forgot the Lord throughout many changes of bodies and change of mind and different aspects of the material veil that appeared before you and enamored you. You're completely swept away. Just like when you dream, you're unaware of sleeping in a bed in Spanish Fork and this and that and the other. You're totally off somewhere. So we're off. We just forgot the Lord for so many thousands of years, but the Lord never for 1 second forgot us. And so his anticipation, his excitement to reunite with us has been building, and for much more than us. Prabhupada often said the Lord is much more eager to bring us back to home than we are to go there. When we return finally to the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, you're going to be amazed that not only is the Lord not going to bear you at arm's length, not only is he not going to bear you a grudge, but he is going to trip over himself. He is going to have a party to welcome you back to the spiritual world. If you read Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita, describes Gopal going from lower to higher, from the realm of Durga to the Vaikuntha planets, and to visit with Prahlad and visit with the Kumaras and visit with Lord Brahma, going higher and higher and higher. And finally, when he emerges in Goloka Vrindavan, it's at the end of the day, he finds himself with his full spiritual swarup, his full spiritual form, in mature, loving devotion. He's seen with his spiritual eye, seen reality and seen the substance of the spiritual world without any material contamination. And he finds himself standing amongst the residents of Goloka at the end of the day, as Krishna is returning from the pasturing ground with his friends and the cows. And as happens every day, everybody's either on the rooftops or standing on tiptoe. Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, the gopis, the gopas, all the aunts and uncles and cousins and all, they're looking at the horizon, and the first thing they see is the dust from the cows' hooves and from the boys' hooves as they approach at the end of the day. But there's only one thing that they're trying to focus on. They're looking if they can see in the dust the peacock feather that adorns the crown on Krishna's head. Only when they see that peacock feather is their anxiety. Is Krishna all right? We know they had so many adventures out there. But when they see the peacock feather, they're peaceful, their transcendental anxiety goes to a newer level, their transcendental blood pressure drops. They see the peacock feather. And Krishna for himself, he returns, and he's who has come back to me? Who is there new? What new arrival is there in the crowd? So just as the crowd is intently focusing to see in the dust the emergence of Krishna's peacock feather, Krishna has the same intensity looking back at the assembled crowds awaiting him at the end of the day to see who's come back to home, back to Godhead. And as Sanatana Goswami describes in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he sees Gopal after such a long time, back home, back in his original spiritual environment. Krishna runs, can't help himself. He's carried away by his joy, his emotion. Don't forget, he's not forgotten about Gopal during the entirety of his sojourn, his absence in the material world. And Krishna is described as embracing Gopal with tears in his eyes and the joy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at being able to welcome his part and parcel who fell but now is back, who was fallible but now has rejoined the infallible living entities. As Krishna contemplates all this and holds Gopal in his arms, the description is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the creator and Lord of millions of universes from whom Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu generated. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is so overcome with happiness. Gopal's arms. You can imagine Gopal, he's got, first of all, he's amazed that God has embraced him, and then God's passed out in his arms. So what do? You're standing there and you've got God unconsciously. Well, I'll tell you what you should do. You should chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we want to follow the footsteps. We want to go back to home, back to God, following the footsteps of those who have preceded us. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bahavo Gana Tapasha, Puta Madbhavakatam, Vita Raga Vyakrora, Puta Madbhavamagatam. Not just one or two or three or four, but hundreds and thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of living beings have chanted Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, served their spiritual master and the previous Vaishnavas with faith and devotion, and they have followed in their footsteps back to home, back to God. Putam Madbhavamagata, Bahavo Ganatapasha. Not just one or two, but many, many have attained my nature by following the ways of the previous Acharya. Prabhupada indicates to us that with these present senses, with these material implements, which are very dull, we cannot perceive anything of the sublime, transcendent Lord. Our senses have to be rectified, decontaminated, purified by the process of devotional service. And when that occurs, the Lord becomes revealed to us. Atasi Krishna Namadi Nabavedgrin Sevan Mukhi Jivado Shayam Ivas Paratya Namham. No one can understand Krishna as he is through the exercise of his blunt material senses. However, he reveals himself to his devotees, being pleased with them for their transcendental service unto him. And that, if you're interested in the references from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 231st verse of the second chapter. Even the great demigods, and we've discussed previously about how Indra got bewildered and sent the rainfall to Vrindavan. Indra estimated the powers of 7-year-old Krishna in Vrindavan, and he got a stern lesson for his uppityness, his presumptuous. Brahma also wanted to test out Krishna's powers by stealing his cows and cowherd boys and putting them to sleep in a cave. And then after a year, when he looked back and saw that Krishna had replaced all those cows and cowherd boys with a completely different set, and as Brahma looked on, Krishna caused them to all reveal themselves, hundreds of thousands of four-armed Vishnu forms, all of which were offering prayers and bowing down to Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahma was astounded. Brahma became affected by vertigo. He was disoriented. And this is a man who's powerful enough to create the entire universe. But when he was Krishna counteracted Brahma's mystic powers with a small fragment of Krishna's mystic powers, then Brahma became totally disoriented and weak and dizzy. Therefore it is said, Janmaniyasyayatahana avigna shorat moyanti yat suryo. This material world appears so real. The Lord has done such an amazing job of creating this veneer, even though it's just a facade, because it comes from the Lord, it has his own attractivity to it. And the material world is vast and mystical as it is very difficult, even for demigods, what to speak of sages and yogis, to penetrate, to go beyond the pale of this material world, and to see the Lord as he is. Mam tu veda nakaschana. What is that? Bahunam jamanamate gyanavam mam prapadit vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabhaha. Says it's not a common thing to be able to see the Lord with the original eyes of the soul. Many, many births are taken by even great saints and sages before they come to know the Lord as he is. And therefore, a great soul who can see the Lord face to face is very, very rare. And it's not attainable through scholarship or through philosophy. Vedasu durabam adarabam atmabhakto. Only through undivided, uninterrupted, unmotivated devotional service can the Lord be seen. And only the Lord, amongst all created living beings, is avigna and sarat. Only the Lord is independent, and only the Lord is all cognizant. If you think about it, even Brahma, who is powerful enough to create an entire universe, is not all cognizant. He knows everything that goes on in this universe, but there are millions and millions of other universes. So he's not aware of what's going on in all the other universes. However omniscient he may be, in terms of this universe, we might call it univision. In other words, his consciousness, his cognizance is limited to the scope of the universe that he created. Just like an architect builds a building, he knows everything about the building. But he doesn't know about the building that another architect built. So Brahma's cognizance is amazing from our point of view. We're like an ant compared to a human being. What we're cognizant of is just this body. But Brahma is cognizant of the Bharata Rupa, the universal body. He's cognizant of everything in the universe. The planets of the demigods, the planets of the human beings, the lower planet. He knows it all. But he's not cognizant of what's going on in the other bodies of the other universes. And he is also independent enough to have created his own universe, and the universe is full with all amenities, sunlight, moonlight, rainwater, everything that the living beings from the higher planets, middle planets, and lower need for their sustenance. That's all been basically engineered by Brahma, and yet at the same time, when he originally emerged from the lotus flower into the darkness, he didn't know what to do. He did tapasya for thousands of years by the calculation of the demigods, and it was only after Krishna appeared before him, Tene Brahma Hrida Ya Adel Kavaye Mayanti Suryo. It was only after Krishna imparted into the heart of Brahma the wherewithal that he was able to go on and create the universe. So even Brahma, even Shiva, even Vishnu, they are all dependent upon Krishna for their powers. Krishna is the origin. He is the original cause, who himself was not causes. He exists outside the causality of this material world. He exists outside time. He exists apart from Bhumirapo, earth, air, fire, water, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And he also has his own pastimes, his own substantive, spiritual, eternal, ever-existing, self-effulgent world with which he engages in intimate, relishable pastimes with his infallible devotees. And even the fallible ones who have left him and forgotten him in this material world, not directly but indirectly, through Karnadakshay Vishnu, Garbhodakshay, Shirovakshay Vishnu, he enters into those worlds, supports them from within the atom, from within the hearts of all living beings, and sits within the heart of the living being as the witnesser, the overseer, and permitter, waiting for such time as we direct our attention towards him by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and begin to make the overture to him that we want to go back home, back to the shelter of his lotus feet, back to Godhead. So we'll just finish up here by a bit more of the purport for Srila Prabhupada for this verse. Prabhupada says, Srila Vyasadeva says in this verse that the manifested internal potency is real, whereas the external manifested energy in the form of the material existence is only temporary and illusory, just like the mirage in the desert. In the desert, it may seem to you that there is definitely water. You can see it shimmering. It's there. It's bluish. It looks wet to all appearance. And being convinced of the presence of water by the impression on your senses, you run towards that water. Oftentimes, the fate of animals who do the same is that they get exhausted. They use up whatever little energy they have by pursuing what appears to them to be water, and they die, and their bones are discovered sometime later. You need to stop, take inventory, ask yourself, is there water in the desert? And you say, no, everybody knows there's no water in the desert. Therefore, I should not trust my senses that what I'm seeing is not real water, because this is not the place where water is found. Similarly, we should also not look to the material energy to find fulfillment, satisfaction, shelter, purposeful meaning. It is only a chimera, a phantasmagoria. There is no ultimate reality in a world which is constantly changing, constantly in flux. There is no ultimate reality in a world which is but a shadow reflection of the eternally existing spiritual world. And yet, at the same time, the Lord has created this cosmic manifestation which has so much the appearance of reality that even great sages and demigods take it as all in all. However, we're here to tell you today, based on what we receive, the knowledge we receive from our disciples' succession, from our beloved Guru, who is Bhakti Vedanta, who is not only decorated with loving devotional service, but ultimate knowledge of the absolute truth. We're here to pass on the good news to you that as real as it seems, this material world, I get so excited, I choke myself up, is simply a shadow of the real world. Prabhupada says here, in the material sky, everything is relative truth. That is to say, one truth depends on something else. However, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the revelation of the Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that the Transcendental Lord, the autocrat in the transcendental world, can be perceived only by pure devotional service. Therefore, it is confirmed by all devotees, by all great transcendental authorities, and by the scripture that only devotional service can lead one to the side of the Lord, and only devotional service can reveal him. Bhakti mama vijanati yavanyas chasmi tatpara tito mam tatpato gyatva vijate tad anantaram. Confirming this in the 55th verse of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service, and when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can see me with the purified eyes of the soul itself, and consequently enter into this kingdom of God. Om Tat Sat. That concludes our lesson today, and we'll start tomorrow on Wisdom Wednesday with this verse and continue to unfurl all this nectarine information about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the spiritual world, and the process of devotional service. Thanks so much. Hope we got Joe from the very beginning, Anjali, Thomas, thank you, Jimmy, Paki, Madhava, thanks for joining us, Bill, Rupa Manjari, a lot of people, Prashant, by Bobby, thank you all. Now, I can't see all of your comments. Nick McLean, Radhe Sham, Basu, nice to see you. How's Sudha? She's still doing her dancing. Frank, so many have joined us. Thank you so much for being with us here on Transcendental Tuesday. I'm going to go get a drink of water, clear my throat. But in the meantime, until we rejoin, until we reunite, don't forget to chant. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.